Go ahead.
Go? Okay. Hi. Well, anyway, when Cheryl asked me to give the Dvar Torah, and she was like, "Oh, you're the Olah Chadashah," my first instinct was like, "I am?" I'm like, "Oh, right, yeah, I am." So that was like my first thought, and I was like, "What should I say?" And I was like, "I have all this like Zionist ideologies like deep in my bones that I've had for years. Like to talk about." It's like religious Zionism and, Geula and its obligation as a Jew and the Jews belong in Medinan Yisrael and all that stuff that I love. I'm into it. But I don't know about you. I personally wanted to say something different. Not just for your sake, but also for my own. I wanted to, in my writing, I wanted to learn something about my own Aliyah, not just, talk about something that I already feel and already experience. Which, thank God, I have experienced so much of that already. And then I was thinking, and I was earlier this year in reading the book By His Life by Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein. A quote really stuck out to me that I still think about all the time, and Sophia knows. And he had a whole chapter about the quote, "Dרכך, דעהו." In all of your ways, know Him, know Hashem, in all your ways throughout life. And after learning about this and really resonating with me, it became kind of my mantra for the year. I wrote it on my mock home, I made a really nice thing for my room, and I think about that quote all the time. I think incorporate into my tefillot. I think about how I can strive to make that part of my life. It also came up in Pirkei Avot when we were talking about the Mishnah about may all of your actions be L'Shem Shemayim. It's a similar idea, making your life about Hashem and making everything you do holier and not just stam. But of course, when Sophia and I learned this, the question comes up is how do you actually do this? How do you live in a way in which all of your ways you are knowing Hashem? It's an extremely important Jewish value, and yet it is almost impossible. All of your ways, but not most of them, all of them. How do you do that? And there's a lot of different answers, kind of being conscious of Hashem and always trying to do things in a holier way. There's all these nice, almost fluffy answers that I think are extraordinarily meaningful. But I also wanted to kind of think about it in a more actually, how can we live this out? And in a sefer called Agadah, Sages, Stories and Secrets, I read this earlier in the year by Rob Emanuel Bernstein. It's not Agadah, but it's also by it's kind of about ideas, and every chapter is a different idea. And there was a chapter about mitzvot, and he was talking about mitzvot, and this idea that the mitzvot are the vehicle in which we can live out the Torah we learn. That's something that we all kind of know and talk about and believe in, that we learn a Torah, but we also have to live it. And mitzvot are one of the ways in which we do that. And I quote, "The transition of a value from one's dictionary to its diary comes through the medium of actions." And that really just highlights the significance of acting. And when I going back to the quote, "B'chol dרכך דעהו," it's not "B'chol machshavotecha דעהו." It's not all your thoughts know Him. It's all your ways. It's your actions. Life is a journey, and it's one where there's no public transportation or cars, back to the beginning of the year, or kind of recently we couldn't use buses, that kind of journey. When things are hard, and it's not just what you think, it's about what you do. It's about your actions. And so I think that the first step to fulfilling, b'chol dרכך דעהו, is in the word דרכך, is in acting. And that's also found in mitzvot. And the second step, I think, is found in the word דעהו, to know Him. And I think that what that's saying is that it's not just about what we do, it's not just about our literal mitzvot, but also the kavanah we have while doing the mitzvah, which is also just as important as the mitzvah itself. And off later on in the same sefer, in the Agadah sefer, he described this analogy of mitzvah being the wings for the Jewish people. And he brought up this story by Hans Christian Andersen, where there's a bird who wants to fly, and he sees all the other birds flying, and he tries, and he jumps into the air, he goes far, but he falls. And he looks at himself, and he's like, these two really heavy appendages on my side. If only I could cut those off. Then I could be able to fly. But then when he tells this to another bird, he's like, no, actually what you think is weighing you down is actually what can enable you to fly. Those are your wings. And that's similarly with mitzvot. Often mitzvot can feel like they're weighing us down. They're hard, they're difficult. But if thought of correctly or in a more positive way, what we think could weigh us down is also what can enable us to fly. And I think that it is dafka, what might seem burdensome, that can also be the vehicle to both figurative and literal spiritual heights. And going back to mitzvah, it's not just about doing the mitzvah, but it's the kavanah you have while doing them in order to direct them upwards. And that kind of goes back to the whole דרכך דעהו. You do the mitzvah, but you also have the kavanah that you're doing it for Hashem. And it's not even just about the specific do's and don'ts of halacha. It's also about mitzvot and the way we act, the way we speak to our friends, the way we want to emulate Hashem and his characteristics and in relating to our friends and our family. There's so many dimensions to mitzvot and the kavanah we have with them. And both of those are extremely important. So now the question that arises, at least for me, when I was thinking about this, is that what about when you're not doing mitzvah? Because it's bechol דרכך דעהו. Talk about דרכך, talk about דעהו. What about bechol? Even though we do mitzvah a lot of the time, thank God, it's not all the time, right? What about those in between moments, I guess? And then that reminded me, earlier in the year, Rav Shvat taught in his class, he has an elective on Rav Kook and Yisrael, and he taught this on Sukkot, right before Sukkot. And he was saying how there's only two mitzvot that you can do, that you can complete just by being. One of them is being in the sukkah, mitzvah merely to be in the sukkah, and it's also a mitzvah just to be in Eretz Yisrael. Just being in Israel is a mitzvah. And in Israel there are no moments in which you're not doing a mitzvah. Just being, just walking, walking in Israel is another mitzvah. So not only when you're in Israel do you get to merit doing all of the mitzvot that we do, that we normally do, but plus we get the fact that we're just being in Israel. And a fully encompassing way to live what you believe in is to actually live your life in that, if that makes sense. Because when I was talking before about mitzvot, is that it's not just about it's Torah is what we believe in, our values are what we believe in, but mitzvot enables us to live them out. That kind of connects to being in Israel and living a life. Living a life has all these facets. It's not just the Jewish part, even though that might be the foundation for us, thank God, there also are other things that are more mundane. Life has so many elements to it. But in order to live out the Torah in every single way and live out your values in every single way, you really need to live it. And how do you live it? You live your life, your lifestyle, everything, from the spiritual to the mundane, in an extra holy way, just by being in the land of Israel. And just having that value, isn't enough. You can love Torah, you can believe in being a kind person, but just believing that isn't enough. You also have to do that. And it needs to be acted upon. And I think you could also see how the wings analogy can apply to Israel as well. Because being in Israel is actually quite challenging. There are a lot of challenges to living in Israel. But if you view it as something weighing you down, it's going to weigh you down. But if you view it as something that can enable you to fly, it'll enable you to fly. And I think that it's dafka, the fact that living in Israel is challenging, is what can also make it meaningful. But only if you have the right intention and the right kavanah to do that. And going back to B'chol Dרכך Da'hu, although there are many elements to this verse, it's not just one way to look at it. I don't think I said, but it's from Mishlei, chapter 3, verse 6. I think that it can't be fully fulfilled unless you're being in the land of Israel. Because as much as you do mitzvot, as much as you make a religious Jew, only unless you're in Israel can you actually fill in every single moment. B'chol Dרכך Da'hu. And now thinking about my own Aliyah experience, Many of our ancestors didn't have the opportunity that I had, that we all have, to be in Israel and a thriving land that belongs and is in the autonomy of our people. And living in Israel is not just the fulfillment of their dreams, my dreams, but it's also the ability to deepen my life in service to Hashem. And when you think of it from that lens, it's not just about, doing something that's significant for the Jewish people on a literal level, but also on a spiritual level, because it's enabling the Jewish people as a whole to become closer to fulfilling this verse of Dרכך. It's enabling us as a people to live our lives closer in service to Hashem. And there's this quote from Rav Kook that I really like, that goes, anyone with open eyes can see that Zionism is the hand of God redeeming his people. And I think that we often look at Israel as a form of redemption, and it really is. But it is not just redemption from hardship. It's also a redemption towards an upward ascension for the Jewish people to serve Hashem more completely. It's not just redemption from, but redemption towards. And part of that is being able, as a Jewish people, to experience Hashem more deeply and to have our mitzvot and our midot and our way of life more fulfilled. And I've wanted to make Aliyah for a very long time, and I'm so blessed to be able to experience my first Yom HaAtzmaut as an official Israeli citizen. Thank God. And I'm really grateful to be able to start my life in a country that may be challenging in many ways, but is also spiritually and physically fulfilling. And I think really the place that gives everybody the most key opportunity to know Hashem in all your ways, and da'hu, and to be able to really and truly direct mitzvot, midot, and just being stam towards heaven, and to be able to just walk down the street doing maybe nothing of any significance, but if you want to, you could just stop and breathe in and think, I'm in Eretz Yisrael, I'm in the Holy Land. And just thinking that can immediately make you feel closer to Hashem, more conscious of Hashem, more capable of being a better person and Jew. And may we all strive to know Hashem in all our ways.